Students, did your teacher ever had a fight with another teacher? Among all the school memories, this one tops all of them. My history teacher was in his 30s. Really a delightful person, and he made the subject quite interesting, which is something more difficult to achieve than usual. His only issue, however, was that he used to talk about his personal life too much. He always used to tell us the issues that he had been having with his wife, how they sleep in separate beds and so on. Felt like students were his counselor or something. Really weird approach. Anyway, at least once a week he would give us some crazy and transparent insight into his relationship. At some point, I got really worried about him, but a 16-year-old teenager had other priorities to think about. However, one day he came into class looking more disturbed than usual. It was complete silence for the first 5 minutes. His face was all red, and he was biting his lower lip. We all knew we were in for a treat. "She left me, kids," he said. "She said that she's leaving and never coming back." You want to hear the best part of it all? Nobody responded. "She left me for that fat biology teacher of yours," he said. Everybody's jaws just dropped on the floor. Apparently, they have met at the Christmas party, and he made her laugh more than I did in the whole year. That's what she told. "She left me," he repeated one more time. Everybody was in shock and inappropriately excited. He continued saying, "No teaching for today, kids. Just read something, or do your homework for other subjects. Do anything at all. I just want silence," he demanded. Nobody made a sound, but you could see subtle grins on everyone's faces. I felt sorry for him. The school bell rang and everyone got out of the classroom heading to the yard. My history teacher was carrying his books walking along the corridor, while from the opposite side the biology teacher, the new lover of the wife, was approaching. They would cross paths and everybody was expecting something to happen. It was that sort of tension that you can just feel. As they were close, right next to each other, the biology teacher nodded in a friendly manner. Next thing you know, the history teacher grabs his heavy book and smacks some World War II history facts on his face. Then he proceeds to do it again and again. Let me tell you, that book looked, and I bet also felt, quite heavy. The whole incident broke out after the principal came around. Obviously, all of us, the students, were pulling our phone out, just like our generation does when something happens. Very soon after the incident, the police came around and arrested our history teacher. That was the last time we ever saw him. The biology teacher, on the other hand, kept his job because he didn't act violently. However, he was left with a couple of stitches above his left eye and possibly a scar to remind him that you should not get involved in somebody else's relationship, especially when they are a work colleague of yours. That was one of the defining moments when I have realized that adults are way more messed up than most teenagers I used to hang around in high school. It was prom night and the party was just heating up. Lights, good music, friends, alcohol, truly what the students really need in order to have fun. But apparently the teachers only needed those few ingredients too, or rather only a main ingredient, alcohol. Now, the school coach and the math teacher had a disagreement going since early on in the year, when some students skipped math class in order to participate in a championship. Ever since then, they both kept arguing who teaches the more relevant subject, and some even heard personal accusations and assumptions being exchanged. It all seemed to be worn off by the time of the prom, if it hadn't been for the math teacher having one too many drinks and started yelling left and right that he wanted a public debate about the ongoing fight. On top of all this, around the corner comes the coach, also a bit tipsy and looking like he is up for a fight. They didn't even manage to get started on their civilized debate as they soon just started arguing and cursing as soon as they met eyes. After half an hour and a few extra drinks later, things started to get physical. The students were completely amazed and even started recording all the events. A few punches were thrown, but nothing spectacular. The real moves were shown only outside, after security kicked them out. Now all the graduates could go back to partying. The only problem was that few did, as most of them followed the two teachers outside, cheering for some more action. No wonder nobody managed to call the cops in time for once they were out. It didn't take the coach long to make the math teacher regret ever picking at him. The math teacher did need some stitches, but he wouldn't face the shame from the school for long anyways, as he got fired a couple of weeks later after the principal and the cops concluded that he was the one responsible for the incident. I'm surprised it even took them that long, as there was an entire movie worth of recordings available. The replacement teacher was a lot nicer anyways, and he knew not to mess with the coach. 10 years later, and when we bring up the subject with our former classmates, everybody remembers it. I mean, how could you even forget something like this? The students that get that coach to train them started bragging, saying they are trained by a true legend. As for the math teacher, a whole set of rumors quickly formed around him and his dismissal. Some say he never recovered from the shame and got a bit insane. Some say he developed a drinking problem after this, and some say that when he went up to the coach to apologize, he started crying from the fear and trauma. I guess nobody knows for sure really, but we do love making up theories about it. It doesn't really matter anyways, because my question is, how do I get a prom as cool and exciting as that one? I used to attend this average school where nothing happened. Days were more or less the same, nothing interesting happened. The school was quite small, and it felt cramped. Also, the parking lot was small as well. Most teachers were complaining about not having enough room for parking, and most of them usually parked their cars wherever they could, as close to the school as possible, and then having to walk. So, you could say it was not an ideal situation for them. In order for the school administration to sort something out, they started to allocate permanent parking spots to certain teachers. The criteria of getting one depended on how many years you were a teacher for that school. So, as you might expect, the ones that been there longer got the nicer parking spots and the newer ones got kicked outside our school premises. Not ideal, but it had to be done. Anyway, I remember getting a new teacher at the beginning our junior year. He was this sports teacher, your usual hotshot. Most of the times he had an arrogant attitude and he used to drive a big SUV. Not being aware of the policy, the alpha male just parked his big car wherever he would see fit. He would usually arrive earlier than other teachers because he had to open up the gym and prepare the equipment and so on, so he always had a spot available. For the first couple of weeks, nobody said anything. Maybe they were intimidated by him, who knows? After the first month, the principal reinforced the policy, trying to remind him to act all decent. He ignored him completely. The following morning, he did the same, parking his car on my English teacher's parking spot, and then the next day same story. Once, I saw the two of them talking in the parking lot, arguing and waving their hands around. It did not seem friendly. The following day, after finishing school, the same thing happened. Both of them were in the parking lot arguing with each other. Some of the students, myself included, approached and noticed that the sports teacher's wheels were deflated. It became obvious now why they were fighting. Things escalated rather quickly, and the next thing we saw was the sports teacher grabbing a bat from his trunk going for a swing. Little did he know that my teacher had a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu and was occasionally teaching martial arts classes as well. We knew it was about to go down. There were just a few students around, but they were so mad they didn't even notice those. We were in for a show. My teacher grabbed the bat, twisted it to apply pressure so that the other guy would drop it. He then grabbed his elbow and put it in the most uncomfortably looking position without even breaking a sweat. Few seconds later, the sports teacher was screaming in a high-pitched voice. It was really funny, and we were all amazed by how easy he disarmed him. I think nobody will talk back to him during classes from now on. After the things broke out, my teacher noticed us and told us to go home and keep it to ourselves. That's why I'm posting this now on the internet. The following days, the sports teacher did not show up for classes. He was eventually fired for not turning up or notifying the principal. He probably was too embarrassed. We haven't really told to a lot of people in school about the incident, so our beloved badass teacher never had any issues. Oh, I truly miss school sometimes. Back in my younger days, I used to attend this fancy school. This school used to pride themselves with all the charity work they were doing and the special events they were hosting. They were constantly promoting a sense of community and more than often sending out a positive message, which was nice and showed initiative. However, I will never forget this one time when they wanted to do something more special. The school wanted to raise money for the local hospitality and they have tried all sorts of options. cookie sell, encouraging parents to contribute, you name it. They didn't want to show others that they couldn't do it after they have promised they would help. So, the principal really came out with this idea that they should organize a sport event together and sell tickets at the entrance. The idea was decent, but what made it interesting was the fact that this is not going to be like any other regular go cheer for your kid's sport event. His brilliant idea was to turn the school gym into a boxing ring and, wait for it, the teachers will be the ones fighting the principal, though this would be the only way to get as many people through the door as possible, so they would raise enough money for the local hospital. So, they did. The event turned out to be a massive success. People were queuing up for long periods of time to get in. All the students were there, most of their parents, and even random people who turned up just because they thought it would be interesting. It got so crowded that we were left with no available seats for everyone. The principal told us to let as many people in as possible and charge them only half of the price ticket if they don't have a seat. It was absolutely packed. Kind of ironic to see more people being interested in amateur boxing rather than a professional event. The teachers started to feel a bit nervous. They were not expecting such big audience, and they got a bit worried they need to put up a show. You have to admire their initiative and what they signed up for. I was involved in the organization of the event and they treated everything really professionally. Everybody went through a health check to be assessed if they are fit enough. Also, they had signed contracts in case things got out of hand. We had a team of doctors on the sideline, as well as a few coaches from the local boxing gym. Everything was sorted. The contract also mentioned that the fights will be conducted lightly, no heavy shots, no knockouts, so they would sort of resemble a sparring session. Of course, this was not advertised to the public because we wanted to raise as much money as possible. He first bell set the scene for the first fight. It was truly a unique feeling seeing your math teacher in shorts taking a few body shots. Everybody was cheering, and the atmosphere was pleasant. After the first few rounds things started to get slow down, and they were dragging. The crowd started to boo the fighters/teachers and you could see the principal getting deeply embarrassed and panicking. Some people left and some of them demanded their money back, saying this is not a real boxing event and that we've scammed them. The two teachers in the ring started to feel more and more pressure from the public who started to shout. They felt like they need to do something, so they started to take things more seriously and fight for real. The screams turned to cheering after each landed shot. Their technique was poor, but it was their fighting soul that counted. I was looking at the principal, and he was pouring with sweat. Maybe he was worried that his teachers would turn up for classes on Monday all black and blue. The crowd stared to fire up, and the atmosphere was delightful again. Both teachers were gassed, but this was the last round and they have put a worthy show. All the students were standing clapping and supporting their favorite teacher. It was one of the most memorable moments from school. The last bell dinged and the fight ended. To the crowd's disappointment and principal's relief, there was no knockouts. Everybody clapped and left with a smile on their face. Both teachers had a few cuts, and one of them a bruised eye. Got to love the spirit of a relentless teacher. The hospital was truly impressed that we have managed to gather all the funds in such a short period of time, and as a token of appreciation they have one free medical consultation for each student. Moreover, we have managed to bring so many people in that we were left with some money. We used those funds to renovate the school gym. Everybody was really proud of this achievement and grateful for everyone that put on a show. I must say, students thought twice to talk back to teachers after seeing what they can do in the ring.